initially, with less frequent monitoring coming in later stages. However, there are methods in the program for increasing the CEC monitoring if it is found to, if, for example, health-based CECs are found to be in concentrations of concern, or if the system starts performing as it was determined in the initial and baseline phases. Comments we received on the proposal, there was general support from it from the recycled water community, although there were some recommendations for clarifications in the policy. We did receive other letters, however, that recommended that we monitor additional CECs beyond what was recommended from the scientific advisory panel. For example, the CECs on the notification list that's maintained by the California Department of Public Health. The staff supports the recommendation of the scientific advisory panel and has decided to only include those CECs that the science advisory panel recommended. However, the proposal does allow the California Department of Public Health to recommend additional CECs to monitor on a case-by-case basis. In the change sheet, I'll go over some of the significant revisions for the change sheet to explain them. The first one I explained earlier, that we remove the references to monitoring surrogates in recycled water used for landscape irrigation. The second one, we added additional language in section 1.1 to clarify what analytical methods may be used and the approval procedures for these. In section 1.2, the language is edited to clarify that additional surrogates may be considered for monitoring besides those presented in Table 2. In section 2.2.2, the language is edited to provide flexibility on where surrogates are to be monitored. This is also reflected in Tables 3, 4, and 5. We added this particular language because we received a comment from the recycled water community that their current systems are set up to monitor electrical conductivity just after the RO unit, and they didn't want to have to move it to after the advanced oxidation unit. In sections 3.1, 3.2, and 3.3, we added language to clarify what may trigger additional monitoring and investigation. And during the initial and baseline monitoring phases, what would trigger additional monitoring would be finding a health-based CEC above thresholds identified in Table 7. And once we get into the third operational phase, a decline in the removal facility or in removal percentage from levels established during the initial assessment and baseline phases would also trigger additional CEC monitoring. In sections 3.2 and 3.3, we added language that would require the project proponent to propose a new performance indicator CEC if an existing one is found to be a poor indicator. So if you go into the initial monitoring phase and you're using one of the performance indicators recommended by the Science Advisory Panel, but for some reason it's not proving to be a good indicator, the project proponent is now required to propose a new CEC to monitor that group the original CEC was representing. In section 3.3, we added language to clarify an off-ramp for a health-based CEC. And what it now says is if you've gone through the initial and baseline monitoring phases and you haven't found the CEC at levels identified in Table 7, then the CEC can be removed from the monitoring program. In section 4.4.4, we added language to require the project proponent to submit a proposal on how it will account for dilution and background CEC concentrations when determining CEC removal for a soil aquifer treatment system. And we added some footnotes to tables 3, 4, and 5 to refer back to the text. And for projects that, for groundwater recharge reuse projects that use a novel treatment technology that's not addressed within Amendment A, we originally stated for those that the CECs would be I think proposed by the project proponent and approved by the Regional Water Board in consultation with CDPH. We struck the Regional Water Board on that one, and we substituted the State Water Board. And that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Just a quick one. Oh, thank you, Gordon. Good presentation. I just noticed a little in the details, but I appreciated that you acknowledged Santa Clara's study in your comments and presentation. That shows, you know, a good faith effort at looking at the irrigation issue, and I want to be committed to staying on that. But one was interesting that the perfluorochemicals were detected, and they were a part of the last item we talked about in terms of having aquatic ecosystem relevance in terms of bioaccumulation. But the perfluorochemicals are not listed as a CEC for recycled water. And so it's, I guess, is it of concern because it's
for that?
Well, is it of concern to Santa Clara because it's a performance indicator? I mean, why, if the science panel doesn't consider it a concern for landscape irrigation and groundwater recharge, why is Santa Clara concerned about it?
Well, this is a special study that they performed, and in the special study they were looking at a number of CECs, and my impression of the purpose of the study is that they were looking at a broad range of CECs to evaluate what CECs they should focus on in future monitoring programs. And it's just, I guess,
Right.
a CEC that
Right.
popped up for them.
It showed up, but it's not really, I just would clarify, you know, for the audience for what it's worth, it's not a class of chemicals that's identified as a CEC with respect to recycled water. It is for aquatic ecosystems. But that's perfluorochemicals like Teflon and that sort of thing. It's just, it's a subtle point, but it speaks to the issue of the end point, you know, the beneficial use we're trying to protect and which pollutants are possibly a problem. Whereas the NDMA that was detected is a disinfection byproduct and is a performance indicator also in terms of being detected in shallow groundwater. So that's of interest. Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. Our first public speaker, Sara R.C. from Assemblymember Williams' office.
Is this on? Okay. Thank you, Chairman and board members. My name is Sara. Sara Arce. I'm with the Office of Assemblymember Das Williams. The Assemblymember recently met with board staff and a couple constituents from his district to discuss an issue of importance to him, antibiotic-resistant pathogens present in recycled water. The member is extremely pleased to support the proposed amendment to the recycled water policy that would add monitoring requirements for constituents of emerging concern in recycled water used for groundwater recharge. The Assemblyman would also like to thank board staff for taking the time to speak with our office. They were extremely courteous and helpful. Additionally, the member would like to encourage staff to continue working with the constituents from his district on this issue, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Sara. Sara Amazeda. We got a lot of Saras today, don't we?
All Saras get to go first today.
Yeah, the other Sara, you're on deck.
Good morning, Chair Hoppen and board members. My name is Sara Amanzada, and I'm here on behalf of the California Coastkeeper Alliance. And before I speak on this item, I just want to register my vehement opposition to any potential ban on caffeine, as Jonathan knows, having been in meetings with me. On behalf of the Alliance, I would like to thank the Science Advisory Panel for their work on CEC monitoring and the State Water Board for your work to amend the water recycling policy to include monitoring for CECs. California Coastkeeper Alliance was a member of the Stakeholder Advisory Committee formed to assist with selection of CECs and was an active member of the drafting group for the recycled water policy, and we've since been very much involved with the development of this policy and commenting on it. We strongly support the increased safe use of recycled water consistent with state and federal water quality controls. And therefore, we do believe that the monitoring list of CECs should be as comprehensive as possible to increase public confidence in recycled water, as described in detail in our written comments, and as will be described in some more detail today by my colleague from Heal the Bay. In order to develop a comprehensive list of CECs, the State Water Board should give regional water boards discretion to include additional constituents to the monitoring lists. California's geographic conditions vary widely, and thus different CECs may be of greater concern based on the region. Providing regional water boards with this discretion to add additional constituents to the monitoring list will account for this type of variability. It's also important that the State Water Board acknowledge recycled water impacts to both surface water and groundwaters. The science is clear that groundwater and surface waters are hydrologically connected. Thus, we recommend a policy finding recognizing the interconnection between groundwater and surface water. Additionally, the policy should include language to ensure the State Water Board requires CEC monitoring for surface water once the Department of Health completes its surface water augmentation regulations. For your reference, we've provided suggested language in our comments. And finally, page 9 of the policy has been revised to change the streamlining for small disadvantaged communities to streamlining more generally for small recycled water projects. We understand the need for a proper definition of small disadvantaged communities, but feel that revising the policy to streamline all small water recycling projects is inappropriate and overly broad. We ask that the policy to be changed back to its original intent, which is specifically to ease the burden on disadvantaged communities and incorporate the definition of disadvantaged communities found in section 13193.9 of the Water Code. Again, we thank the Water Board for amending the recycled water policy to include monitoring for CECs, and we look forward to continuing to work with board and staff. Thank you.
Sarah. Ms. Sikich?
Can I, sorry, no, that's okay. I wanted to ask staff to respond to your comments.
Okay.
I mean, the geographic difference, which is
Okay,
the
Beth.
question, and the surface, why not say something about surface and groundwater connection, and then the streamlining chain?
Okay. Okay. About there is a provision in policy that states that the regional board should not add additional CECs to the monitoring list. The reason that we're doing that is to ensure a consistent level of monitoring for these particular projects, so that the project proponents understand, what kind of monitoring levels that they're going to face if they move forward with a proposal for a project.
But I mean, is there a geographic difference? It's a question.
So let me jump in, because
Dive
we're-
in.
yeah, I'll dive right in and get myself underwater here. There's a history here that needs to be put in context. The recycled water policy, one of the areas that the advisory group, that the stakeholders that helped develop it, didn't have a clear path on, was CEC monitoring. And so the path they chose was to have us impanel a science advisory group to decide what CECs, because on one side of this group there was folks in the recycled water that felt like people were adding CECs at random without a good cause, and on the other side there was a view that there wasn't enough CEC monitoring going on in a comprehensive way around the state. And so this panel not only put together a recommendation for how to add new ones by going through this process, but also selected a limited set of them. So the staff didn't feel comfortable then saying, and in addition, you can add anything that you want at a regional board level. We're talking about recycled water of wastewater. There is not a lot of regional difference in the source of that.
Okay. For the second question concerning the priority pollutant monitoring, with the priority pollutant monitoring, I've looked at a lot of the priority pollutant monitoring data when I was a state pre-treatment coordinator. Most of that priority pollutant monitoring basically shows non-detect, 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 non-detect for those priority pollutants. You see bisphthalate showing up quite a bit. You see methylene chloride showing up a bit, but otherwise it's fairly unusual to see those popping up in the priority pollutant scans. Recognize that, you know, when you're monitoring for twice a year, we may be doing that monitoring, but not necessarily doing a lot with the data. I would recommend that for monitoring the recycled water sites that we move towards a more focused monitoring system, and that we focus on those CECs that we're actually finding in groundwater. What's that?
Changing it from disadvantaged communities to all small recycling projects, why did you make that change?
Yeah, well, that was, I'll explain, a reduction in monitoring, you know, for the priority pollutant monitoring, basically to reduce the monitoring costs for, you know, facilities that, you know, go up to 1 MGD.
Well, but it's my understanding that for small disadvantaged communities have small recycled water facilities, and there are other small recycled water facilities that are the roughly equivalent to what is. So this isn't really about small disadvantaged communities. This is really about small facilities that produce very little, or, you know, a small amount of recycled water. Is that correct?
Well,
And that's one reason for making that change? That you're not, it's not that you're looking at the small size of the recycled water facility.
that's correct.
Okay.
Assuming the reason you did it is to try and encourage recycled water even at small facilities?
That's correct.
Is there any less, I mean, I get that.
But the level of
But if you're looking
monitoring-
for impact in general, you could have an impact in a small community that might be of as much concern as it would be from a big facility. But the question is, would you learn enough from the monitoring of the big facilities to put more requirements on anyway, so you don't need them to do the monitoring, but you would put a new requirement on them if you put it on a big facility if it was a public health or aquatic health problem? Okay, that wasn't a sentence, so I understand why you're looking at me that way.
The level of monitoring is the same as what we would require for an MPDS facility that's discharging directly into a surface water body. So
I think what Gordon's trying to say is that the policy before they changed it, so when they had twice a year monitoring for priority pollutants, was a higher level of monitoring than we require if they just discharge that to the surface water or to the groundwater. And so it discouraged them from moving and using that for recycling. That's what I think he was trying to get at. Is that correct?
that's correct.
Sorry, I just wanted to get the answers right.
Good morning, State Board members. My name is Sara Sikich. I'm the Coastal Resources Director for Heal the Bay, and I'm here today to speak on behalf of both Heal the Bay and Heal the Ocean, and I greatly appreciate the opportunity to comment. Heal the Bay sat on the Stakeholder Advisory Committee formed to assist with the selection of the CEC Ecosystem Panel experts, and we were active as a member of the drafting group for the State Water Recycled Waters Policy. And I really thank the science panel today for sharing their presentation on CECs. I felt like that was very informative as well and related to this topic. As you know, we're extremely supportive of the recycled water policy and the intent to expand recycled water use. However, there are aspects of the amendment and the process of its development that are of concern to us. We are disappointed that many of our July comments were not addressed in the latest revised version of the policy and Attachment A, and thus concerns we expressed previously still stand. Our biggest concern is that despite the potentially thousands of CECs being discharged, the amendments propose a very limited set of monitoring proxies. This misses an opportunity to build scientific credibility and may fall short in assuaging public concerns over recycled water. In order to provide our state regulatory agencies with an accurate and comprehensive CEC dataset, the list of CECs monitored should include contaminants from US EPA's Candidate Contaminant List 3 and the list of CECs proposed by the California Department of Public Health, in addition to those recommended by the expert panel in their final report. We support moving the science forward in the CEC debate, but we're worried that with such a limited amount of constituents required in this amendment, it may not move the science forwards enough in a meaningful manner. In addition, we urge the State Board to update the list of CECs monitored on a biennial basis using best professional judgment and with input from the regional boards. Collaboration with regional boards, as we heard from Sara and in this discussion, is critical in order for data collection to keep on pace with CECs entering the environment and to prevent steps backwards in current monitoring efforts, recognizing that some regional boards have already proposed more extensive lists of CECs to be monitored than what's being proposed in the policy. And we feel that because there are limited levels being looked at in this policy, that should act as a floor rather than a ceiling for this monitoring. Another concern with this amendment is that it permits certain dischargers to monitor only surrogate parameters and at a frequency determined on a project-specific basis. We strongly oppose such direction, which would reduce rather than encourage consumer confidence in the use of recycled water. A more preferable monitoring regimen would be the replacement of surrogate monitoring with the monitoring of all relevant CECs for an initial screening period. Receiving water monitoring could be conducted at least annually with a trigger of increased frequency to quarterly if any CECs on the list are detected in the effluent more than once in a 90-day period. In addition, if a plant experiences malfunction, monitoring of some parameters could increase for a 3-month period. The amendment should clearly state that under no circumstances should surrogate monitoring replace CEC monitoring. However, if the State Board moves forward with surrogates, the State Board should retain the monitoring frequencies deleted from the initial assessment phase and baseline phase monitoring requirements in Attachment A. The policy should also provide for stricter enforcement of illicit discharges. One of the draft changes to the policy incorporates a reduction of the monitoring of landscape irrigation to once every 5 years. This reduction can only be justified if water supply and public works agencies provide effective compliance assurance efforts on irrigation runoff to reduce its impacts on waterways. From our experience monitoring the Malibu Creek watershed for the past 12 years, we've found that nuisance runoff from spray field irrigation can result in significant contributions to flows in surface water. Thus, there should be greater effort, perhaps through municipal stormwater permits, directed towards abating illegal runoff discharges if landscape irrigation monitoring will occur as infrequently as proposed. We urge the State Board to direct staff to revise the policy as outlined above to ensure that we promote public confidence in recycled water, as we feel it's very important for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Sara.
And now I have a question for you, because I didn't understand this reading your comments. Are you saying, I heard a little differently now, are you saying that we should monitor everything on EPA's list, or that we should choose more of the things on EPA's list?
I think in an ideal world, we would want to monitor everything. We understand those challenges, but we think that EPA's list should be what's included within.
And how many things are on EPA's list?
I'd have to look back at it.
Yeah, I just sent off a missive at the break to EPA folks to see where they are on this stuff.
I can look into that as well.
Yeah, is it hundreds though, or is it
Our point
Tense.
person who reviewed this is not at the hearing, so I would have to consult
All
with her
right.
to find
I
out.
just think it makes a difference, as if there are a few more that are helpful, if you think the panel is wrong about the ones that are there being indicators, some sense of why you would add others would be helpful. I tend to agree with you that this is a place where, particularly in the use of recycled water, which I'm also a huge fan of, having worked on some of the earliest and biggest projects in the country, consumer confidence is actually really important, and a misstep early could doom the program. So this is one of those things where I think belt suspenders, flying monkeys, you know, at the beginning, an investment at the beginning is going to pay off in the long run. So I'm a little bit more, in this issue, I'm a little more comfortable saying, let's be precautionary in adding more at the outset if they might add value, as opposed to being an indicator, and then let them off later if we find they're not a problem.
No, I appreciate that. I can look into it.
Okay, that'd be great. The staff may know too. So, and then I wanted to give staff a chance to answer some of these questions as well. It's just easier for me as we go along. The question of updating the list every 2 years, why not in an emerging field? And I'll look to you, whichever of you
I'll
want
jump
to
in.
answer.
It's a workload issue. I mean, it's, you know, the panel takes about a year to do its work. If we ask them to come back and reevaluate, it's going to take a lot of time and money. So we try to do it about every 5 years, and that's what we proposed.
You do that in general every 5 years?
That's what we have proposed, is that the panel reconvene every 5 years and evaluate the new analysis and science.
All right, I may want a reopener there on my view. And then can you explain a little bit the use of surrogates? I'm trying to understand it from the way I would think of it, that if there's a surrogate that's easier to measure or see, or it's going to give you an indicator of treatment processes, I can see how you could use that to limit the amount of testing you have to do, because you're going to find out, going back to what I said earlier, whether you need to take action of some sort.
Let me give you an example here of a surrogate. If you have a reverse osmosis unit, that reverse osmosis unit is going to be taking out a lot of the various ions in it. For example, it will take out chloride, it will take out sodium, and as a result of that, you'll see a reduction in electrical conductivity across the reverse osmosis unit. And that reduction in electrical conductivity would be used as a surrogate for removal of constituents of emerging concern. Because if you start seeing increases in electrical conductivity, that indicates that there's a break in one of the membranes, and that's allowing these salts to get through the system. And if those salts are getting through the system, then CECs are probably also getting through the system. And
So that's even more conservative than monitoring for the CEC itself.
And so for the electrical conductivity, you can monitor that continuously. Whereas CECs, they're expensive to monitor, and you can't monitor those on a daily basis because the expense would be so high.
That makes sense. Okay, that one I did understand. I just wanted to make sure I understood it. And then the landscape issue, the issue of runoff is an interesting one. I get the issue of whether it comes in contact with groundwater when you're just doing landscape irrigation, but how did you deal with the concern that Sara number 3 raised about surface runoff and overwatering and some kind of QA through stormwater? You must have thought about it.
There may be some small amounts of incidental runoff from these irrigation sites, but the amount is going to be really small compared to that which is discharged from a wastewater treatment plant.
So it's all relative, and as we do our work in aquatic ecosystems and through the stormwater program, we'll be getting data that we can use to figure out what kind of treatment you're going to need. Okay.
And your talented chief counsel found the EPA list. It's over 100 constituents.
Thank you very much.
Also, isn't, I mean, in our stormwater permits, we have certain prohibitionary language about over irrigation, right? Isn't that true?
That is correct. And the policy itself lays out a set of practices to reduce that over irrigation and to identify what we would consider incidental runoff, which is the incidental runoff is allowed under the EPA stormwater rules for dry weather discharges, but what we have done in the policy and we're incorporating in the small MS4 and we encourage in the other large MS4s is that definition so that people have an idea what is excessive incidental runoff.
Yeah, that's important. Also, you touched on it, but the list, the EPA's CCL3 list, and then also DPH's pollutant list. Isn't it true that the scientific panel used those lists and others as a starting point?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Geaver. Sara, elbow him. He turns down his hearing aid when I talk so he doesn't have to listen to me. You got to crank him back up again. Hi, Joe.
Hey, I apologize. I should have pulled my card. I didn't realize until this morning that my comments are redundant with Sarah's. So I'm just going to support
Thank
their.
you for the
and because
consideration
my
of
name isn't
acknowledging that. I
Sarah,
appreciate
it
it.
probably wouldn't be appropriate for me to speak anyway, unless you want to call me Sarah. But I just support the. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. Ms. Adelman?
Thank you, Brenda Adelman. I also support the comments of the two prior speakers. It cuts down on my list. The main concern I have is that there's going to be no monitoring of recycled wastewater for the endocrine disrupting chemicals when applied to landscapes. And this is tertiary we're talking about, not the more highly treated. Also, if there's zero monitoring and regional board can't add any monitoring, that means regional board is prohibited from doing any monitoring in this instance. Now, the lower Russian River, and I have to use this example because it's the one I'm familiar with, but it's one of the most popular recreation areas in the whole Bay Area. We are currently under emergency low flow requirements because of a biological opinion. And there's an EIR coming out, and they are going to be probably appearing before you next year to try and make those permanent. So we have this situation where Santa Rosa has a major irrigation project. They do a lot of irrigating. I've been tracking this closely for a very long time. And even though they have a pretty good program, nevertheless, because they spray irrigate in urban areas, there is significant runoff. And I'm very familiar with the definition of incidental runoff, and that is why I provided you with pictures taken over an 8-month period of the same site that had excessive irrigation water on it. I'm deeply concerned about this situation because the water, and I have pictures of the water going down the drains, it goes into the creeks that lead to the laguna, that leads to the Russian River. And if you think about this in terms of the high impact of small exposures to endocrine disrupting chemicals and the impact on the fish, I mean, the laguna, I mean, there's just not much water in these waterways, so it doesn't really, it doesn't dilute the toxins at all. So the toxins have a much more, much stronger effect on the aquatic life and on the human beings who are using the river. And people in the lower river area and the recreational people come to recreate are seriously concerned about this issue. The laguna is impaired for 6 different constituents, so it's not only a problem with the wastewater itself, but people apply herbicides, pesticides, all kinds of soil amendments, and what happens is that runs off with the wastewater, and nobody's talked about that at all. In fact, nobody responded to any of my comments, and I submitted a lot of comments and a lot of attachments. No one responded to Dr. Vandenberg's comments about the study on low-dose impacts. and I'm rather disappointed about that. So my big issue has to do with doing some monitoring for endocrine disrupting chemicals in where landscape irrigation occurs. And I personally, I mean, I know there needs to be a limit. I know cost is a big issue. And I would recommend at a minimum to monitor for the estrogen beta 17, the estradiol, because that is the most dangerous of all of them. And if you did nothing else, required nothing else, if you just required that, it would be a step in the right direction, and it would be better than having nothing at all. And I just would really appreciate your consideration. It's a very important issue. We live in an incredible area, and people are really concerned in our area about this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brenda.
Actually, a question for staff, because Ms. Adelman raised a good point. There were many comment letters that came in October 8th, October 9th, and the response to comment that I have, at least anyway, was dated October 4th. So how has staff, or will staff, respond to the recent letters that just came in, some of whom I think were new commenters? So that's one question for staff, and then a request for Jonathan and Tom. It would really be helpful if there's a standard format for response to comment. This particular set of response to comments was very challenging because it used a different format than we normally do. So it was a challenge just to find the commenters and their comments and their responses to comment. But please file that away for future responses to comments. But my question to staff again is, how were the comments that were submitted October 8th, 9th, around that time frame being responded to?
Okay. They did come in a week ago. We reviewed those comments, and we made revisions to the recycled water policy accordingly. We plan to complete our response to comments document and make it available when we send it over to OAL.
Well, that's not helpful to those who commented today, because the board is being asked to act on this item today. Jonathan?
I'm sorry, we were talking about the response to comment issue in general, and I missed Gordon's response, but in general, the response to comments are not, we don't respond for the commenter. We respond so that you all have an opportunity to see those, and this is, we of course make it public for the folks to see how we responded at some point, but we try, it's really for us and for you.
Okay.
Well,
in that case, then...
Hold on 1 second. I would just like to clarify. I mean, in many respects, it's important for the board members, but there is also a public component to this, and the public participation elements that we try to satisfy through providing the response to comments documents are such that they don't only allow the board members to bridge, if you will, the issue between what the staff has proposed and what the public is commenting on, but also to help ensure that the public, the Office of Administrative Law, and others recognize why the boards are undertaking this particular activity and why they have either made changes or not made changes based on the comments. And I kind of always hate to contradict John, but I feel that that's important that everybody appreciate that. We take the obligation pretty seriously, and it is a requirement that we prepare a responsiveness summary. It is possible for staff to go through many of the comments as I looked at them, actually repeated comments that were there before. It is possible for staff to orally respond to those before the board acts. But in general, we should have a final document before the board, or at least a document in form that addresses all the issues. We may have minor corrections that staff may read into the record, before the board acts on a state policy for water quality control.
Yes, I was interested in staff's response to Dr. Vandenberg, and I did find it on page 19, a response to comments. It's comment number 30, and it's in the board package. So there was a response to Dr. Vandenberg.
Okay, well, I thought it would be on the web, and I was searching the web last night.
It's hard to find. I think this relates to board member Dodek's.
And
you know,
I would love to
concern.
know how to see those comments. I
Perhaps
was not
staff could
able to.
summarize your response to that particular commenter, since there's been an interest expressed.
Yeah. We did meet with the Heal the Bay Coastkeepers and Heal the Ocean, and we did discuss the reasons that we revised the policy as we did.
And
this
that-
was
I'm
before
sorry,
the-
does that
this was
include-
before the last set of comments came in.
And I guess I was asking you to respond to, was it Dr. Vandenberg's comments, which is of interest to Brenda? Could you summarize your response,
To
since Brenda has not seen it and she has raised questions about it?
okay, so
Do you have it?
Mr. Moore, you apparently identified
Yeah.
where the comment
Yeah,
is
it's
in the response to comments
page
document.
19 in the center, and it's comment number 30.
Comment number 30.
Yeah.
Okay. The summarized comment says.
See, staff can't find the response to the comments either.
Okay. The panel should reconsider their suggestion that exposure of human and wildlife populations to EDCs, including pharmaceuticals, should not be concerning if the concentration of these chemicals are low. Relying on centuries-old adage that the dose makes the poison is not sufficient to protect public health. Okay. The response was, the scientific advisory panel recognized the uncertainty in interactions that result from additive, synergistic, and agonistic effects. These effects were captured in the safety factors that were applied in deriving the MTLs. The approach is similar to US EPA's approach to deriving drinking water MCLs. In addition, these interactions may be measurable through bioanalytical analyses that are currently being developed.
Can I make one more brief comment? I'd just like to say the Endocrine Society and all of the scientific establishments, the Linda Birnbaum, who is director of NIH, all of these people support Vandenberg and the study she helped author. And I didn't catch everything he said, but it sounded like the importance of these studies and these declarations by these scientific people is just being minimized. And that deeply concerns me. And I'll say one other thing, that I do a lot of writing in Sonoma County, and I write for a paper that has 30,000 circulation.
Wind it up here pretty quick. We have other people that need to talk.
I'm sorry?
Please wind it up here pretty quick.
Yeah, this is real quick. I'm just going to say that people rely on me for information about these issues, and I do a lot of writing on these issues, and I'd like to be able to tell them that this board has seriously considered the important points that I think I'm bringing up, and will consider doing some testing of the irrigated wastewater, tertiary wastewater that is not as highly treated as the wastewater in Southern California. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. Beth Hola.
And board members, just as we move into this phase, I want to be clear where we are. I've had an opportunity to confer with both the executive director and the chief deputy. You know, based on the fact we don't have a responsiveness summary before the board today, it's our preference not to have staff try to respond to everything orally that was raised in that second round of comments. You know, I want to be clear. I think staff were going above and beyond by providing an additional opportunity for comment. But we want to make sure, you know, when the board undertakes an effort like this, that we are satisfying our public participation requirements, and that the public and you have adequate responses to digest as you move forward. So my recommendation would be that the board not act on this today. Obviously, a number of people have traveled. I encourage everybody to make all the comments that they would intend to make, and don't hold anything back. And then the board, will work to reschedule for final consideration by the board with an appropriate document. And again, I don't fault staff. I think they've really gone above and beyond in terms of trying to generate documents under extraordinary time constraints in some instances. And this was a case of a second round of comments, and unfortunately one issue slipped through. So,
Thank you, Council. Beth.
Good morning or afternoon, Mr. Chair and members. Beth Hola, on behalf of the Santa Ana Watershed Project Authority. Appreciate the opportunity to speak this morning. We haven't had a great opportunity to review the comments that came out, or the revisions that came out recently, and with the recommendation, I don't know what you guys are going to do, that you don't adopt today, we would really appreciate the opportunity to submit further comments. I know that just perpetuates the problem that you are facing at the moment, but I think that some of the revisions that were made do warrant a little further exploration by some of our experts that we're not ready to comment on today. But that being said, Santa Ana Watershed Project Authority is generally supportive of the revisions to the policy this morning, but have several concerns about specific verbiage, and just is interested in some clarifying amendments that would help maybe not have some drastic effects on recycled water. I won't get into the whole long list that I have with me, but just for example, a couple would be, we use the phrase groundwater recharge reuse. SAPA would like to see that specifically defined so it only applies to intentional recharge projects using recycled water. A lot of time, if you have, as you know, discharge into a stream, you have unintentional recharge. Just that little clarifying comment would help. The reporting limits that are included in Table 1 of Attachment A might be misconstrued as impairment thresholds. Simple way to avoid this would just to be include an additional column indicating the risk-based threshold for each constituent. Just don't want to raise flags when they're not necessary by someone who might not have a greater knowledge of what each of these thresholds are. People might see just that threshold and be like, oh my gosh, we're above it, and not realize that it's not as bad as it looks. The document requires the CEC monitoring to be performed before and after individual treatment processes. SAPA would love to see that clarified so that the requirement only applies to following tertiary treatment, not before and after primary, before and after secondary, and then before and after tertiary. I have further comments that I don't need to get into today. I would love is there an opportunity, is it appropriate to submit some more written issues at this time?
Actually, let me ask, unless I've missed it, SAPA had not submitted comments today.
They were an hour and a half late on getting their comments in, so I'm very sorry for that. That's why I was trying to get a few in there as I came today. They were just a little late.
I think my preference is to not open this out for yet another round of public comments because we have plenty. I still have plenty to read. So my suggestion would be if there is any additional urgent comment you wanted to get into the record, that you do so verbally right now. And when you're done, I actually have a question for you based on a comment that someone else submitted.
Okay. Completely understand and maybe try to work with you a little bit. Maybe we can have comments on the revisions that were submitted today. So if something it's new, we're only looking at the new part.
Again, the revisions that were submitted today were made in response to the comments that were received. Okay. So we could get into an unending cycle of response and comment and response and comment.
All right. Go ahead with your question. I don't want to take up
all right, then my question is, and I don't know if you have it handy, but one of the newer comments that were submitted that was not responded to in the response to comment was a letter from, Mr. Andy Eaton. I don't know if you know him.
Not familiar.
Okay, but he actually referenced something that SAPA did that he thought was excellent, and he recommended it to us. Let me just quickly read a short excerpt of his comment. Rather than requiring that each project develop a quality assurance project plan, we believe the board should propose a uniform set of QA/QC criteria that includes specific requirements for the use of lab control standards, fill blanks, etc. This approach was used by SAPA as a fundamental part of a multi-year monitoring program of more than 20 wastewater treatment plants and generated consistently high-quality data. Are you familiar with this effort by SAPA? And was there a monitoring protocol or QA/QC criteria that SAPA produced that perhaps we could consider rather than starting from scratch?
I would love to get you more information on that. But one of in our comment letter that we didn't get submitted, we did ask that you guys ask the Blue Ribbon Panel to recommend appropriate laboratory and performance standards in the 2015 report. So you just, moving forward, that's there. But we'd love to get that information back to you with no reason to reinvent.
How about if we compromise and accept their late submitted comment letter? Since it actually has information that I want to look at.
You're going to encourage people to think it's okay to be late?
As long as they address my concerns, yes.
You know, certainly the decision to let in late materials is at the board's discretion. You know, the danger and the issue that we always have is the consistency and wanting to apply uniform rules across the board. But, you know, you've heard representations about what's in the comment letter, and it is up to the board if it wants to admit that into the record. I'm not sure, and Ms. Townsend may have to check her own records, whether there were any other late comments, and if there were, you know, I would propose that we have an equal standard across the board for any comments that were received the afternoon.
Even if they don't suit Ms. Doduk's needs?
Especially if they, no, I'm just, even if they do not.
You know, my question to the very barely late commenter, did you have a chance to review comments from other parties, and did you see some overlap? Because that's certainly, having done the comprehensive review of this whole thing, there's a lot of overlap. And staff did organize things in a way to combine similar comments. So did you see similar issues, or were there issues that you raised that were not raised by the 30-odd letters?
I would like to say that there are plenty of issues that we raised. I truthfully hadn't looked at other comments in detail to answer your question sufficiently.
I would also like to make a suggestion that I would not recommend that we create another comment period to get written comments on the proposed changes, but I would make an offer that staff would be more than happy to explain and hear concerns that people had on those, just to, you know, provide that opportunity. But I don't want to go through another round of comments and responses.
Take care of you. You almost dodged a bullet, but not quite.
So if staff could please meet with SALPA, and especially get information about the effort that they conducted and their QA/QC documents, and see if there's anything that we might be able to utilize. Thank you.
And if you open the door on Halloween and somebody's dressed like a sledgehammer, it means this came back to haunt us, okay? That's fair. Martha Davis.
Good afternoon.
Why don't you get to the microphone before you start talking?
Excuse me, Martha
Yeah.
Davis with the Water Reuse Association today. I really appreciate the conversation that you've been having both on this item and the earlier item. I was one of the stakeholders that negotiated the recycled water policy. Mr. Bishop did a perfect job of describing how we came to the recommendation in that policy, recognizing both the incompleteness of the information, the concern about having a monitoring program that was random acts of kindness but didn't really help us better understand the challenge that constituents of emerging concern, how they are really impacting us, and the need to bring the best available science into this conversation, fully aware that the best available science was going to change. And what we wanted to do was capture the wisdom and use that to inform the monitoring program do it in a very purposeful way so that we weren't just having people randomly adding things to be evaluated, but also knowing that we're going to want to take that information and really drive updates. So as we got more information, we would anticipate either adding things to the list for review or having an off-ramp for those things which we determined were not going to be enough of a problem to be of concern. The other thing that's important, I think, for this conversation today is we're talking about emerging constituents for public health, and there is a parallel process going forward for environmental constituents. And there's overlap between those two issues, and there are differences. So, you know, we're creating a framework with this program that is going to help us deal with, I think, which is going to be much more complicated when we do get into the environmental constituents of emerging concern. I mean, clearly there's going to be geographic differences and other concerns that are very specialized to that area. Having said that, I also want to thank your staff for the way in which they've handled this process. I think this has been a model of the interaction where on a very complicated, very technical set of issues, we've been able to bring best available science in, bring in various agencies, and come up with a pathway through this that will help us get better information, but do it in this very disciplined way. Your staff have done a remarkable job of going back and forth with all of the different stakeholder groups. For the water reuse, we did submit comments at the beginning of the month. I had a chance to scan the changes that have been made this morning, presented to you by staff. Quite frankly, I see a whole bunch of places where your staff took the concern that we had raised, took the language that we had suggested, and came up with something better. So I see a lot of great changes. I can't say that within an hour I've been able to really read it as thoroughly as I would like to. I do see a couple of places where some new language has been presented that I don't think we really talked about. I think one of the issues, I pulled it out as an example, is 4.1.1 on the dilution water. I think we thought of diluent water as something that was helping to dilute the CECs as part of the analysis of what was going on. I think this is the first time we've had a discussion about diluent water potentially containing CECs that could be additive. Hadn't thought about that, hadn't talked about that. You've got language that suggests there should be a proposal from the proponents on how to handle this. It sounds like a reasonable process, but I think we want to talk about it a little bit more. So I think, Mr. Bishop, we will take you up on your suggestion that we come in and chat about a few things that we see that's just new, probably responsive to concerns or questions that have been raised by other stakeholders, but we do want to make sure that we understand the implication of it. But having said that, I mean, I think that this is a tough issue. We need a really responsible way and a disciplined way to have this conversation so we can move forward and continually keep our eye on the ball. Where are we headed to? How do we make sure that we're really making decisions that are based on real information that will help us resolve and better understand how we're going to handle the constituents of emerging concern? I think the last item I just want to touch on is I think we're all very sensitive within the recycled water world as well as in just the water world on runoff from irrigated landscapes. And I think this is a case where water is water and it picks up stuff as it comes off of those landscapes if it's allowed to take up, you know, whether it's fertilizer products or run across the streets and pick up the oils and become urban slobber. So I think it's really going to be important as we move forward to really be mindful about how do we deal with incidental runoff issues across all the different water types rather than trying to approach it from the standpoint that somehow one type of water is different from another type of water. Because at the end of the day, if you're in the ecosystem and you're in the stream, that urban slobber is still coming into the stream and we need to deal with that. So I'd be happy to take any questions.
I think they're hungry, Martha.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. That's our last speaker. Council, I would assume that if we hold this over until the 1st November board meeting, that will give you all enough time, or Karen?
What I would propose is that this, that the board doesn't need to set it for a specific agenda at this point in time. We'll work and figure out what options we have and try to get it back to the board as quickly as possible. There are two house cleaning issues that I was going to briefly touch on. First, if there are, I guess I'll say three, if there are any directions that the board members wish to give staff before this comes back for final consideration, certainly I would encourage you to go ahead and have that discussion at this point or deliberation. Second matter is there were no other comments received the afternoon of the comment deadline other than the SAPA comment. So if the board chose to accept that comment into the record, that would be fine. The third, with respect to the issue of, and I recognize Chief Deputy Bishop has partially touched on this issue, but the change sheet today and whether or not there should be an additional written comment period, I do not think that it is necessary. However, what I would encourage is you will have another board meeting on this item. And that, you know, individuals will have essentially almost a month to digest the change, or 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month to digest the change sheet that was circulated today, and that the focus of comments at any subsequent meeting should be on that change sheet. Focus of oral comments.
Direction of staff?
In terms of direction to staff, I think, from my perspective, finishing up the response to comments, accepting the SAPA letter, the late SAPA letter. I assume this will be the last time it will ever be late, so that's good.
No, it may not be the last time she's going to be late. It'll just be the last time it's going to be accepted.
Okay. I would support that. And also meetings, if clarifying meetings with water reuse, but also with the environmental community would be important. And if there's a way in your follow-up meetings to guide people toward how the on-ramps and off-ramps for the recycled water policy, CEC, the recycled water CEC policy work, and how we are taking actions based on science, not arbitrary. Give them some guidance as to how they can keep up with this, how they know when new information is coming in and what we're doing with that, where it goes, so that there's some confidence that it's not falling into a black hole. I think that's a conversation. It's not something for the policy, but I do think that is I hear that concern. People want more monitoring. They want more this and that and the other, largely because they're afraid if they don't get that, we're not going to pay attention for another 5 years.
I'm very supportive of staff's approach to this. I think, you know, like I said, I did do a thorough review of the comments and responses, and I think your staff is finding the right balance, you know, of addressing valid issues that have come up and being constructive in the language changes to be responsive. I was prepared to move adoption. So please finish the responsive summary, and I look forward to seeing the item.
Kim?
Yeah, I'll have questions for, sorry to interrupt. I'll have more questions for staff. I'm on another briefing to talk about some of the things, and I have to say I'm one of those people that couldn't find the response to comments at all, so I just asked someone to actually print it out, because I'm trying to go paperless, and this may have been a mistake this time. So I'll read all those first and then sit down again.
Paperless works fine, except for this particular issue. I too would like to meet with staff. In particular, I want to discuss the feasibility of pulling the signs advisory, whatever we call it, panel together more frequently and updating the list more frequently than 5 years. I don't know if it's, you know, feasible from just all sorts of perspective, but let's explore that.
That's it. Thank you. We will put this off to a date to be announced, and we will resume at 1:15 with item number 10. Thank you.